So my stadium and team is the Barclays Center, home to the Brooklyn Nets. Information that needs to be stated first is that in 2004, Bruce Ratner and a Russian billionaire and a Jay-Z bought the team for $300 million with plans to move it from New York, or move it to New York after it failed to seal a deal for a new arena in Newark, New Jersey. Looking first at the political issues and the decision process. Biggest issue of the stadium was a reliance of Ratner on the use of eminent domain. Eminent domain is the state, on behalf of a third party, which was Ratner and his Atlantic Yards project, seized private property in return for money. The citizens who didn't want to leave their homes were forcibly removed, and these angry citizens filed a lawsuit against Ratner and the state. And on November 24th, 2009, the New York Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the state, stating that any property that was underdeveloped was subject to eminent domain. And then the citizens argued that there was this was for just personal gain, and the state, the court ruled that this was a means to an end, and the end was being public purpose. Looking at the stadium financing structure, 1.6 billion of the 4 billion was to be publicly funded. That is the entire project as a whole, as the Atlantic Yards project was 16 towers over 22 acres, including the stadium. 40% of the stadium was publicly financed. Being publicly owned, they were eligible for tax-exempt bonds. They issued these bonds in 2009 for $510,999,996. They named their stadium after a London banking group, and the company agreed to pay the team $400 million over the next 20 years for those naming rights. $150 million in government funds were approved for street and mass transit improvements around the stadium. Ratner personally sold $60 million of his share of his stake in the team to raise money, as the Nets were bouncing around a lot, waiting for their new stadium. Looking at the argument against public financing of the stadium, you have there was fear that influx of traffic and tourists entering the area would threaten the world-famous Brooklyn atmosphere. There was fear that the project would drive up housing costs and extinguish cultural hubs in the area. Some businesses in the area had already started closing due to these rising prices. Mainly rent prices were extremely starting to rise. The look of the stadium was ugly. It had this rust look to it, so it looks unfinished. Old stores, such as the Crest Pharmacy, as I touched on these old stores a little bit, like the Crest Pharmacy had been in the area since 1999, and they were forced to close from these rising prices. You had a furniture house that had been on the street for 21 years, and they were forced to close or forced to move locations. So you have this stadium pushing out local businesses and driving up property costs in the area. Last, the project would abuse the state's power of eminent domain, taking private property from the citizens to give to a private entity for private use instead of public use. Now, as I stated earlier, you know that the court ruled in favor of the state. So, based on this information, with this stadium coming in, you have rising costs in the area, rent costs, forcing local businesses out. You're taking private property from the people in the area, so you're not making any friends as you move in, or making anybody happy, and you're bringing in a lot of issues, and threatening the atmosphere of the area. So based on all this information, public financing should not be a good thing, as the public is paying for a detriment to their community. Looking at the argument for public financing of the stadium would create 2,000 jobs as a direct result of the building. Buffalo Wild Wings and the shopping mall across the street would have a direct impact. Stores in that area would definitely see an increase in income, in revenues, as well as the parking garage in the area. Sporting goods stores around the area would get a influx of Nets goods, and it would allow them to sell these goods and create a consistent revenue basis to tourists and people coming to events as you're selling these Nets goods. Looking at all the extra revenue and jobs that the stadium's creating in the area, it's fair that with the extra revenue, the public should help finance this, so that because they're receiving revenues from the benefits of the building.